The platforms have become the rogue actor in this. They are part of the problem. They are cornering the market, if you want, of data and cognition. And they are now part of an ideology, an ideological agenda that is not pro-human.
Welcome to the DIACOMET podcast. In this episode, we spoke to Divina Frau-Meigs, professor of media and ICT sociology at Sorbonne Nouvelle University, expert on media and information literacy, internet governance and cultural diversity, who also holds the UNESCO Chair Savoir-Devenir in sustainable digital development. Thank you, Divina, for taking your time to talk to us.
Thank you for having me.
We would like to know, from your perspective as a media sociologist, what would you say are some of the key features of today's digital society that we need to understand in order to be able to live in it responsibly and safely?
This is a big question because the digital world, as we knew it in my generation, I am from the 80s, when the digital world was all about liberating information. The digital world has changed, and now there's three interlocked cultures of information that are merging and converging. Media, as we used to know them in the analog days, that has now doubled up as social media, and with it come things we didn't know before, like echo chambers, filter bubble, all the disinformation conduits that we are all analyzing, and that AI is also helping amplify, but also information as documents, because in fact what we are using when we're online is mostly files, all kinds of files that have been curated, have been saved as archives, but they're not just archives, they've become databases that have cheap, shareable copies that can be transformed without us even seeing it, and can be falsified, can become inflammatory with deep fakes, for instance, and that can train LLMs, large language models. So that includes media files. And so here we are, different formats, text, video, images, all being shaped and reshaped. And on top of that, of course, information as data, which we thought was just encoding all kinds of documents and media in basic units. Remember the old bytes? Well, now you have to talk about tokens, you have to talk about LLM models that are machine learning, and data have become assets instead of just things that you give in exchange for free access. They can be monetized, they can be intelligence about you, they can lead to surveillance and monitoring, and data are now what's driving AI systems and automating human tasks. So there we are. We are in a very complex information system, and very often we all lag behind as citizens. Some of us are more on a media-leaning side, but didn't realize how much there could be astroturfing and making people believe things that don't actually happen. Some people are very happy thinking, oh, I have archives, I have reliable sources. Well, no, they can be tampered with. You can even now have copies without originals, with AI slop and that kind of stuff. And with data, is the same thing. We were encouraged to share data, now we're obliged to share it, and it's being sort of used against us and manipulating opinions and geo-targeting us. So I think we all have to catch up on these three levels at the same time, which is complicated, but that's what media and information literacy is about.
So educate ourselves on all of these aspects.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. Okay.
Which is why in my UNESCO Chair Savoir-Devenir, I insist on these elements and the sustainable dimension of this digital development.
You talk about sustainable digital development. Can you explain this phrase a bit more, and why is this important?
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because I created my chair in 2013. And at the time, sustainability was not very much a big word. We were all on development and sort of all the globalization and interconnectedness, etc. But I was already wondering how sustainable that would be. And we tend to forget the materiality of the internet. internet world, the fact that it depends on a lot of energy, but it's really omnivore of anything that is energy of all kinds. So there is a kind of not only a mind print of media and the digital internet, what I was saying, the media, the data, the documents, but there's also a footprint, which is to say that we realize now more and more that the data centers are really extremely bad on the electric grid, and that to construct computers or anything related to the digital requires rare earths, a lot of toxic waste. So by sustainable now, I've expanded it to enlarge this vision so that the ecosystem of media, which I've been describing, and the ecosystem actually of information, as we've just seen it, in many ways mirrors the ecosystem of the environment. They have similar crises. They are reaching the limits of what is expendable on Earth in a reasonable way, in a sustainable way. They are toxic in different ways. We have toxic waste, but we have AI slop, which is toxic to the internet. And this is why I was telling myself, oh my goodness, there's so much uncertainty coming up with these two major crises. How do I reassure people as an educator that they can still have agency and mastery over it? Which is why I created the concept of savoir-devenir and knowing how to become, which in English I like to translate as forwardance, moving forward, being able to project oneself in a world of uncertainty. And it means knowing how to use media, data, documents and files, and to regularly update yourself on what is going on, but also using the digital environment to simulate situations without risk. You can play, you can move one data and you have different results, and data visualization is actually a great example of how you can simulate situations without risk while seeing the opportunities. And so this is what we're trying to do at the UNESCO Chair Savoir-Devenir. We're trying to promote media and information literacies as a way of forging an education and a type of futures literacy that fosters our soft skills and what we're good at in terms of collaboration and learning and risk-taking and curiosity, but also understanding that information is a bedrock of our culture, but it needs to be protected and promoted. And we have to be aware of the fact that it's a lot about power and a lot about being aware of who is behind this whole process. The platforms, of course, are obvious culprits, but not only governments that don't do enough, rogue actors that take advantage of it to target democracies, etc., etc.
Could you perhaps describe how you see the level of literacy today? Do you think people are aware, society is aware enough about these issues that you're talking about?
Well, that's a very good question because I would say if you asked me that about 10 or 15 years ago, I would have been a little bit down and pessimistic, because the conversation in the years 2010, 12 was, drop media literacy. Code is what's important, knowing how to code, the operational side of the digital world. And we, all the people in the UNESCO chairs around the world that are media literacy chairs, including the one that is presiding DIACOMET, we thought, no, it's important to know the soft skills around operations and what it involves, what ethical choices you have to make, what it implies in terms of human rights, etc., etc. We were losing the battle. And in fact, it's only because we had a series of crises that happened. The first crisis in 2013-14 was a crisis of youth radicalization online, with all the terrorist attack following the Syrian war. Then there was the crisis of disinformation and the stolen elections. Now, of course, crises have been accumulating all in the same direction. And so governments have at last realized, it is important to educate the citizenships, be it young people or older people, because they need to build resilience, and that's a key word these days, and which is to say they need to be able to not only protect themselves and not only cope with what is going on, but they have to be able to express some agency and some control over it. So not fall into the pitfalls of disinformation, promote information quality, support ethical journalism, etc., etc. And so since 2018, 2019, there's a kind of recognition that media and information literacy, together with fact-checking, have literally become professional disciplines in their own right that help us anticipate forwardance, anticipate risks, whether they are political, technical, or psychological. Everybody's talking about well-being at the moment, because of course I forgot the COVID crisis that also pushed for media and information literacy. And so we are now being almost taken hostage by governments. NATO is seeing it as a soft policy, soft power, promoting media and information literacy to foster this kind of resilience. And so we have to be aware as educators and practitioners of media and information literacy to not to compromise, if you want, our pedagogical and educational freedom and independence, so as to be able to express our critical thinking, including at governments, at platforms, and other types of actors.
Would you say any groups or any generations in society are more in need of building this kind of resilience or more vulnerable to all the disorders in the information environment? Or would you say the threats are different for different parts of society?
You're right. The trends are different, in fact. In the early days of disinformation, people, including researchers, states, and targeted young people because they were considered as the ones most at risk, but also the ones who would amplify and just click without thinking, etc., the clickbait generation. But in fact, as we conducted more research, we realized that in fact the most at risk of falling into the trap of disinformation were older people who are in fact far away from information, from education. They haven't been back to school in 30, 40 years, and which is why in forwardance, in the Savoir-Devenir, I always include updating yourself regularly, which the networks allow you to do. You can read and find more, go on a YouTube channel that is specialized. So at the beginning, this is where we were in 2016, 2018. I would say that now everybody is at risk, now being the moment where we are in this huge leap into AI-driven systems that, again, are driving media, docs, and data. So we see that people feel a risk of displacement, that our human experience as a whole is moving. We are offloading, if you want, our thinking on the AI systems, the large language models, ChatGPT and Claude and all of them. We all have an excessive dependence on them, and we are externalizing our judgment to them, which can lead to some kind of cognitive atrophy, and everybody is at risk there. I know people who used to tell me, for the beginning stages, the ideation is mine, and now they're saying, I'm sleeping, I'm doing everything now with the LLM, I'm asking everything. So, it's very hard to keep self-discipline, and this is adults talking about it. And so it's very complicated for all of us to see that, how to resist that. And for me, one of the ways of going about it is intergenerational, to be honest. I think these issues can be addressed by both young and older people sharing experiences on how they feel about going to AI or not to AI, and going to disinformation that is harder and harder to distinguish them from reality, and finding back some of our shared values and cultural norms around emotions and trust. So I'm afraid it's now a general need of media and information literacy that we need. And it's not AI literacy per se. For me, AI literacy is the same risk as code. It's operational, and it's happened to code. You don't need it anymore. You don't need to code. The AI does it for you. So what the AI doesn't do is the literacy part. It's the values part. It's the shared values parts, and other soft skills around empathy and creativity and curiosity. So this is what we have to hold for our human specialness.
What kind of implications can that have in a society long term? We don't know, right?
Exactly. We don't know yet. It's hard to evaluate. This is so recent. The problems of this offloading. We have more and more hard evidence that there is loss of critical thinking skills. It's called accumulation of cognitive debt. You keep losing your cognitive capacities because it's so easy. So you download your memory because what's the point since you download your capacity to map your travels, etc., or move in a city because you have a GPS, etc., etc. So it's very risky in terms of all the capacities that we humans have developed over time with the help of other humans and the objects, the artifacts we have created to do that. Because, files are sources. They are the collected mine of the knowledge accumulated for centuries. Writing has developed new parts of our brains that were not developed before. And now we see that these zones are atrophying in the brain, and that stopping to write and read silently, is atrophying these parts that have made us what we are as humans, curious and sharing knowledge and building on the knowledge of others, being carried by the shoulders of our past heroes of knowledge. So I don't see an AI robot doing that to me. They can't do that. But from a media literacy perspective and a savoir-devenir perspective, it is not a tech problem. It's a human problem that we are creating to other humans. And the absence of regulation, the disruption without permission. I mean, the whole labor force is being disrupted. Universities feel that they are being obsolete and displaced, etc., etc. There's nothing replacing it. And the problem with that is that the platforms have become the rogue actor in this. They are part of the problem. They are cornering the market, if you want, of data and cognition. And they are now part of an ideology, an ideological agenda that is not pro-human. It's coherently elite, mega elite, not to say MAGA elite, but even far beyond these far-right circles and the way it's evolving. So for me, the platforms at the moment are the rogue actors. We used to, say the rogue actors are undemocratic, illiberal countries, but platforms are fostering illiberalism, even within liberal countries. So they are intoxicating us. They're monetizing. They're not moderating this information anymore. It's all traffic for profit. And really, their ideological purposes are averse to human rights-based societies. And this is something we have to realize fast.
And act upon it, right? With concrete regulation.
I think it can. We're having examples, but at the moment, it's funny in terms of savoir-devenir and media literacy, I'm trying to develop a competence that we don't talk about often, at least in Europe. Media and information literacy is all about critical thinking, agency, but in fact, it should be basically about being consumer savvy. Because at the moment, the way to go about these platforms that are always pushing regulation here or there, lobbying in Brussels, in Washington, wherever, the way to go is us as citizens. I am actually hopeful when I see the lawsuits against Meta and YouTube in California, not for the content, so, it doesn't touch freedom of expression, for functionalities that are faulty, that create addiction, bad service, and they're going to have to pay. They'll appeal, but they'll also modify the functionalities. They will never say it frontally, but it will happen. So I think these elements show us that we can, if we are aware of it, we can do that. What I would wish for Europe is to go beyond what Americans can do, which is to say one person suing a whole company. We need to go as a group. So class actions, group actions where all of us suddenly can tell the platforms, well, you owe us. You've been betraying us. You've been trampling our values and we don't want this anymore, or you'll have to pay, or, and this is also the other alternative, we have to create our own platforms that look like us, that represent our kind of values. And it's happening, but it's a long process because among the least media literacy educated are our governments, our elites. And so they're making decisions at best based on some expertise, but not enough, without incorporating enough of the partnerships. If I take the example of a ban, the smartphone ban that we are having here, that's the European response to what the Americans are doing by suing the platform themselves. We ban. We should say we put the responsibility on the individual and preferably the young people. when they're not responsible. We are, adults are responsible. And okay, let's imagine the ban. So you remove smartphones from schools. Supposedly it's going to liberate 3 or 4 hours of brain. But if you don't put anything for the brain to use these 3 or 4 hours, the ban is failed in advance. It's doomed to fail because people will be frustrated, will not understand why it's happening, don't have any alternatives that are proposed, like, I don't know, playing board games, doing sports, etc., etc. It doesn't come with additional sport facilities, with instruments to play, etc., etc. So doing the ban without bringing the pedagogical accessories, the cultural accessories that would make sense of a ban is typically sort of gap in understanding among our decision makers on how this works.
So replacing the activity with something which will bring more literacy.
Yes, well, it's media literacy because it's about understanding how platforms make you dependent. And it's true that if you try to live without even a week and without these smartphones and smart screens, you'll find that, oh my God, this is very difficult. I am so dependent. But an awareness of this dependence is fine, but that is not going to lead to change. Knowledge and awareness doesn't lead to change. That's what research shows us. What leads to change is two things. It's first being hit personally, like that young woman who's suing Meta because she felt suicidal. She went all through a whole body transformations and self-hatred, etc. So that alerts, this puts emotion into the balance. And the second thing we need to know is that the others are sharing our view, that we're not alone. And when you know you're not alone, you feel empowered. And this is a lesson we learned from the environmental approach and the sustainable development approach in environment. People will sort out their trash when they can visibly do it and contribute to it in the urban or rural environment. So there's trash cans, yellow, green, blue, and you see other people doing it. And so not just understanding how it can help, but it's also, oh, I'm contributing. We're sharing a vision. We're doing something together. We're a collective, not just individuals. And I think it's the same thing for the brain as it is for the environment.
Just one more question. You've also mentioned human rights in the media environment. What do you understand by this phrase? What does this entail in the digital environment?
The platforms, among other actors, are rolling back human rights. So they're rolling back freedom of expression. And when the Americans use free speech, it is typically not freedom of expression. It's a code word for censorship and for disinformation. Same thing is happening for censorship and online censorship of even influencers in the news. So same thing is happening with privacy, with data privacy being totally trampled. Names of people being revealed. Remember the Epstein files, the victims are revealed. Just is again and again a trampling of that. And in media and information literacy, we don't necessarily deal with the 30 principles of universal human rights, but we deal with freedom of expression, we deal with privacy, we deal with education, we deal with participation, and with dignity, because people lose their self-esteem when they are cyber harassed or things like that. And so these have to be brought back in based on people's experiences. The human rights principles are old now, they're more than 60 years old, and people have lost why they were created in the first place. So we have to reinvent them for ourselves and transfer them in the digital sphere, not let the platforms and others use the pretext, oh, that is a different universe, so we can do things differently, and just trample on even on labor rights and things like that. So I think we are in need of revisiting these rights regularly, comforting ourselves that they're meaningful, that they support free societies, that free societies support free thinking, innovation, etc. And it's something that robots don't have, but we can tell them to do that. If I ask ChatGPT or another LLM to write a misogynist text accusing women of being bad, it will tell you, I cannot write something like that by law, etc. So we can, you see again, it's a human problem, not a tech problem. We can embed these values in the technology by design, early, not after, as an afterthought and after a lot of pain and a lot of lawsuits. And this is what media literacy is about, and for wardens is about. You anticipate. You don't get rid, and the point is not to get rid of media, banning them or banning AI. That is not the point. The point is, when do I use it? When do I not? Etc., etc. And that's when you have a feeling of agency and control over your connected life.